Hey folks, hope everyone's having a good week and you're enjoying the life in the 21st century, the circus that's going on at the moment, or so it certainly seems anyway. If you like these videos, this one's going to be on Banksy. If you like these videos, do subscribe and give the thing a like, and you can also put your comments down below as well. See what you've got to say about this one. The reason I'm going to talk about Banksy today, it's not because I've only just realised he exists. Unfortunately, I've been bombarded with Banksy for God knows how many years now in the media, as has everybody if they live in the UK, and no doubt other countries as well. But the reason I want to talk about him was I kind of got reminded about him. I'd forgotten about him for a bit, to be honest, and I got reminded due to a story that I saw in BBC News, which is a genre of it all of its own, to be honest. You could make videos about BBC News articles all day about how bad they are. Banksy himself, I mean, I don't think he's a good artist at all. I think he's extremely cliched. His work is the least thought-provoking junk art that I've ever seen, and not in a good way. You know, there's people that can do that right, but certainly not Banksy. I will hold my hands up. I do love art. I'm certainly no knowledgeable person about art, but I do enjoy art, and I don't need art to be beautiful. I certainly can look at art that's disturbing and enjoy that as well. But this guy Banksy, his work is none of that. It's just political statements that could have been dreamed up by any schoolboy. The points he makes are just dire, predictable. He's a middle-aged hipster, and we can see that through the work that he puts out. There's zero talent there, in my opinion. No artistic talent, that's for sure. But that's not really the point of the video. Some people obviously might like his work, take it on its own merits. I can't see it myself, but some people might like it. But the point of the video is really more about the fake hype that surrounds Banksy. What actually put him on my radar again was the article with Stormzy in it. Now, Stormzy is another media favourite that we're supposed to all love, or everyone's supposed to like. He's supposed to be a cultural icon. He's not. He's a cultural icon if you look at the Brit Awards or if you look at the BBC website. That's pretty much it. Or the mainstream media. That's about it. But Stormzy appeared on a stage at a concert with a stab-proof vest on. I think it was about a year ago, maybe. This didn't impress anyone, apart from obviously the mainstream media. But the stab vest had a scraggly Union flag painted on the front of it, hand-painted, and that had been painted by Banksy, of course. So because that was painted, the Union flag was painted on it by Banksy, the stab vest is now supposed to be one of the finest pieces of design in Britain, or certainly nominated for an award. It's been nominated for the Beazley Designs of the Year award. And of course, as soon as they nominated this stab-proof vest with a Union flag painted on it for an award, because it was done by Banksy, the BBC started writing about it, as did the music magazine NME. Major publications and networks began boosting it, as they always do with Banksy and Stormzy. It's all false hype, it's all advertising. It's basically a circle jerk, to put it crudely. People get paid every time this stuff appears in the news. Every time you see a story about Banksy or Stormzy or an award getting, something getting nominated for an award, people are getting paid all over the place. The value of brands goes up whenever this kind of backslapping happens. In this case, the backslapping is the BBC, Banksy, Stormzy, all the investors, and all the other people that are involved and know each other, providing access to each other's industries. And the end result, of course, is this fake culture that gets squeezed out onto our screens. So I don't know if the BBC and the media are trying to create a fake culture, if they're trying to dictate to people what their culture is or what it should be for some nefarious reason, or if it's just a byproduct of these kind of background agreements to make money. But certainly millions of people are definitely not seeking out news about Banksy and Stormzy. They're certainly not doing it of their own accord. It's been plonked in front of you and you're reading it because it's there. With regards to Stormzy's stab vest as well, it's clearly meant to be some sort of political statement that he's got in mind for actually wearing that. Why would Stormzy need a stab-proof vest? I don't know. Is it because he goes around causing problems? He turned up to a rival rapper's home recently with his mates and they all piled out of a car and started causing a ruckus. Just not very social behaviour. So I just wonder if he wore a stab vest or that specific stab vest during that incident. But enough about him. I do find it extremely unsurprising that Banksy painted Stormzy's stab vest in the first place. It didn't shock me at all because Banksy is the Stormzy of graffiti artists. He's got no artistic talent. He's got nothing to offer. He's extremely tame and bland. He'll be forgotten about in a generation. Certainly, probably before that. But he gets boosted by the BBC and the mainstream news outlets at every turn because he's got the right messaging. It's exactly the same as what they're doing with Stormzy. The BBC and the rest of the media, they really shouldn't be engaging in PR stunts, especially the BBC, actually, because they're publicly funded. They shouldn't be engaging in PR stunts just to enrich people. I recall the incident with the shredded painting. If you don't remember, we were actually all subjected to an obvious setup that was presented as a news story where a painting shredded itself in Sotheby's auction house after being bought by somebody. Now, to suggest that Sotheby's wasn't in on that is just a ridiculous suggestion, but that's what they claim. And if they weren't in on it, then the security team needs to be sacked, because that would mean that there's no measures in place to prevent somebody packing a remotely operated electronic device into a massively oversized and bulky frame of a painting, then smuggling that into an auction room, and then activating it by remote feet away from the faces of some of the wealthiest people in society. If that's what actually happened, then they really do need a security rethink. But I don't obviously believe for 1 second that that's what happened. Sotheby's clearly knew what was going on, so I think we can all give them a round of applause for Sotheby's and Banksy and the BBC for coming together in this way with a manufactured display for the common people like me and you to lap up. Obviously, what happened there is that Sotheby's, which is supposed to be one of the most respected auction houses on earth, colluded with the mainstream media and a totally overhyped, artificially hyped up artist. They colluded together to perform a publicity stunt, and it was all done just to create headlines. Sotheby's effectively made clickbait with Banksy and the BBC. And you can obviously see the amount of planning and choreographing that would have been required by all the different parties involved in this beforehand. It probably took them months to plan. And if I was being extremely harsh, I would accuse them of fraud, because this manufactured hype actually increased the value of the piece. No, it was obvious that that would happen. So the buyer that bought it ended up with something that was worth far more. And I suppose that's what they want you to think is the art in this whole situation. They like to pretend that they're thinking outside the box with this kind of stuff. But it's fake things like this that make me suspicious that Banksy's stuff even sells for the prices that they say it does. He probably has people in auction rooms bidding against each other, so it's shill bidding, they call it. People bidding against each other. They might both be shill bidders on behalf of Banksy, and they're just doing it to get the price extremely high, and that then artificially creates a benchmark for Banksy's stuff. It's just my opinion, obviously, but it just would not surprise me with the amount of artificial enrichment that actually surrounds Banksy. I think it would be unusual if that wasn't going on. Again, though, it is obviously just my opinion. But the Banksy trade is one of total greed, obviously. You expect that in the art scene, but unlike other art, literally unlike any other art that I can think of, it's nothing more than greed. There's nothing else to it. The kind of people that are on the Banksy train, they're just people joining in the big piss take, in my opinion. They're spending a couple of million and then they're holding on to it. They're waiting and hoping that it retains its value or increases in value, and then they're offloading it onto the next greedy bastard that's hoping to do the same. It's got much the same kind of look and feel as a financial bubble. It's a bit like the Rolex trade. With regards to Rolex watches, you can't buy a Rolex for retail price. Not that I could afford one anyway. Sometimes you'll pay double on the second-hand market, and that's the same day that a model is released. People will buy it, put it on the second-hand market for twice the price, and people will snap it up at that higher price. And Rolex knows this goes on. It's not because they're worth double the price, and it's not because they are in short supply. It's because Rolex is artificially creating this supply and demand conflict they're creating a hype by putting a stranglehold on the stock that they put out, and then that drives this grey market, and all these people who are in it simply to make money. They don't appreciate the watch at all. And the difference is that, well, many of them don't. The difference is, unlike Banksy, that Rolex actually sells something that has value of its own. Even if it isn't worth the price that people pay, you're still getting a high quality, long lasting item that does what it's supposed to do. With regards to Banksy, it's similar, but it would be more along the lines if Rolex just put their name on a bit of paper and people went crazy trying to buy that. There's nothing valuable about it at all. And then you've got the poor saps that find a suspected Banksy in the wild. We've all seen them in the news. Property owners, shop owners, they see it and they wonder if it's a Banksy. They basically just go weak at the knees thinking they're going to make a fortune. They start acting a bit silly. You know, people start having arguments about who owns it. People start cutting off bits of their house to preserve the graffiti. These people, they wouldn't pay a tenner for this artwork, this supposed artwork, if it was just someone else that painted it. Let's say their neighbour came and spray painted a few crude stencils in black and red on their house. Let's say the neighbour went over to the art lover's house and spray painted a mouse with a balloon and some anti-war mottos on the art lover's house. The art lover, upon looking out the window and seeing that, would be pretty annoyed with his neighbour and probably tell him to get that cleaned off his wall, please. But Banksy comes over and proceeds to tarnish the same guy's house without permission with the very same thing. The guy finds it in the morning and he's absolutely over the moon. He's hugging his wife and kids, he's phoning his parents, he's calling a press meeting, he's doing all that, giving a press conference, and then he's removing his wall so that the graffiti doesn't get damaged, ignoring the fact that it's causing water damage to his house by removing the wall, but hey-ho. It's just stupid behaviour, and I suppose that's meant to be another aspect of what makes it art. People who are prepared to debase themselves in front of the media for a little bit of money, or potential money. If Banksy was actually a true artist, I think he'd come back at night and he would paint over his artwork whenever that kind of thing happened, just to take it away from them again. Or he would state just before a piece was sold that it wasn't him that painted it, so that it lost all its value straight away. I could get behind that. I think dashing the hopes and dreams of people that are debasing themselves in the media for money is far more edgy and artistic and interesting than just coming over and thinking you're a hero, vandalising their property with a tag that might as well just say these people need money, and then just walking away and letting them deal with the consequences of it, having to basically now protect what is seen by many in society as a valuable piece of art. You've even got councils putting plexiglass over graffiti, and they all know who the guy is. It's an open secret that they all know, all the councils where he operates, they all know who he is, the police all know who he is, but yet they allow him to graffiti their town. They actually want him to, and they invite him to do it. If they were treating him like anyone else, they would prosecute, and probably he would be jailed, because that's what happens to prolific graffiti artists who are caught. It doesn't happen to Banksy, though. Banksy graffitied a train the other day, spray painted all over the windows, and they cleaned it up, which was good. You don't usually see them cleaning up a Banksy, but they cleaned it up, which is exactly what should have happened. But then they invited Banksy to spray paint somewhere else that wasn't a train window, which is just pathetic. And this whole he's anonymous thing, that is just a load of bull. It's just a massive game of pretend, just like so much surrounding Banksy. You know, the BBC knows exactly who he is, the police knows who he is for sure. So he's getting all this special treatment just because he's a media favourite. Is it maybe a case that if you get endorsed by the BBC, you don't go to jail for committing crimes out in the open? I think we've heard that story before. Normally, as I say, people who are caught graffitiing repeatedly would end up going to jail, and they would be paraded in front of the media as if they're just like delinquents. You know, there's a couple of brothers that got jailed. There's plenty of other instances of people getting imprisoned for graffiti, and the way the media talks about them is as if they're absolute scumbags, whereas they talk about Banksy as if he's some kind of local folk hero, British folk hero that's risen up organically and is loved by all. Banksy made a documentary as well, and no shock, it got nominated for an Oscar. Was it even a documentary? His film was called Exit Through the Gift Shop. I think it was a documentary that followed people through the street art scene. Sounds kind of interesting, don't get me wrong. I think street art's also, I'm not hating on street art, I think it's pretty cool. Certainly some of it can be excellent. Banksy's does not fall into that category at all. But are you telling me that his film was Oscar nomination worthy? It's far more likely that it was just made in order to be nominated for an Oscar. Again, people get paid every time this happens. Gets nominated for an Oscar. All the investors in the Banksy brand make a ton of money. The Oscars get a load of publicity. The newspapers get a load of money. It's just that, it's the circle jerk going on again. It's completely inorganic though. And then he made some theme park, which was supposed to be, I believe, the opposite of Disney World. And again, it was just meant to be edgy, but it was just backed by the BBC to the hilt. And I think the only people talking about it were the BBC and mainstream media. It was just the usual try-hard crap as well. No artistic merit in any of the things that it was showing in the theme park. Just the kind of thing that would have been, as I say, just dreamed up by teenagers, I suppose, trying to be edgy. It's all I get from Banksy. There's no depth to his work at all. He's also a complete hypocrite. He famously wrote in one of his books that copyright is for losers, and then he attempted to sue a small greeting cards company for using photographs of his graffiti on their greetings cards. So these photographs of Banksy's graffiti, which was scrawled on public property, obviously Banksy doesn't understand how photography ownership works. For someone that said copyright is for losers to then try and come after someone for using their own photograph just because the photograph contains images of his graffiti, it kind of beggars belief a little bit. And he doesn't understand the law either. He got so arrogant, so cocky, that he actually, in order to stop this greeting cards company actually having the right to use what he claimed to be his trademark, an image of his graffiti, he opened up a shop selling merchandise for the sole purpose of showing that he was using the imagery in a business setting and therefore taking away the right of that independent greetings card company to use the image of his graffiti. And as a side note, the proceeds of his merchandise shop, Banksy's merchandise shop, actually he used it to he publicly announced that he was doing this as well. Obviously, he just wants everyone to know what a good guy he is. He used the proceeds from that shop to fund a migrant rescue boat to pick up migrants from the sea. This boat ended up needing to be rescued itself, with over 200 migrants stuck on it because the boat got stranded because they'd picked up too many people. They obviously didn't know what they were doing. All these people then needed to be rescued from the massive pink Banksy migrant boat, which was just an advert for Banksy. That is the problem with virtue signalling. There needs to be some proper thought and preparation behind the things that you do. If it's just simply as a virtue signal and an advert and a PR stunt, you shouldn't be rescuing people from the ocean if that's your motivation, I'm afraid. And I think Banksy's entire persona is just a flimsy PR stunt. But of course, people that like Banksy will say that that's the art. That is, I'm missing the art in that. Regarding the boats, I mean, there was already boats patrolling. So boats that were actually patrolling properly with professionals, people who do the job of rescuing migrants, had to come to help this cumbersome advert that was going around picking up just as many people as possible and then getting stranded itself because it was overfilled. But that aside, he attempted to game the trademark system, basically, and his case ended up getting kicked out of court for bad faith, which means the judges told him to get out. They said, you can't just use loopholes in trademark law to impede someone else's business. A total embarrassment from someone that said copyright is for losers. He attempted to stomp a little guy into the ground, and a little guy who had full legal rights to do what he was doing attempted to stomp him into the ground, totally barefaced, totally unashamed, and then just gets kicked out of court. And when it gets kicked out of court, just a little mention in the papers, a little mention in the media. It wasn't just all over the place like it ends up when he shreds a painting, for example. I think the constant media focus makes Banksy and Stormzy, actually, I think it makes them believe their own hype. Either they're not realising or they're just refusing to acknowledge that they're just nicely packaged, media-friendly, fake edgelords who have businessmen and investors and councils, all that kind of people, falling over themselves to get a cut of their brand. It's not art, it's marketing. The only way it could be art is if business is also art. And there's an argument, a philosophical argument to have, a conversation to have there over a couple of cups of tea. But what they're doing is not art, it's marketing. And as I said before, it's fake culture. It's inorganic. It hasn't come about on its own. These people, they're being placed in our view. It's pre-digested, fake, edgy characters. And I feel sorry for all the politicians and the businessmen who think that being connected to these two people makes them look cool. Because nobody outside politicians and businessmen actually think they are cool. If you imagine actually name-dropping Stormzy, actually seriously name-dropping Stormzy, or calling yourself a fan of Banksy, even their names just sound like snappy little media brands. Stormzy, Banksy, just total creations. I think Banksy's core audience, or his fan base, if you could call it that, is mainly made up of people who think they're in on the joke, but who are being double bluffed. And then there's people who think they're in on the double bluff. Those are the ones who consider themselves to be extremely intelligent. Then you've got the people who think it's edgy to be boosted by the BBC for some reason. And you've got people who are well past their prime. Those ones from a bygone era who they don't know what they're talking about, but they're trying to keep their finger on the pulse of youth culture. Now, it happens to us all where we lose track of what's going on in culture. You should just gracefully let it go. Forget about it and move on. Don't try and keep your finger on the pulse. Maybe I just don't get it. It could just be me. I just don't like being fed this, like I say, pre-digested crap. They're doing it with news, you get fake news, and they're doing it with culture now. And they've probably been doing it all the time, to be honest, but it gets on my nerves. And it's unfair on the younger generations who are consuming this stuff unwittingly. God knows what else is actually going on. If there's so much under the surface of just Banksy and Stormzy, there's just got to be so much fake culture that's being pushed on people right now that isn't being called out. Either it's not being noticed or people have accepted it to be real. I try and avoid news as much as possible these days, which keeps me out of it a bit. Especially the BBC. The BBC News especially is just like I said before, you could make a 10-hour video on that. You could actually look at any random BBC article, and within the first paragraph you've been lied to twice. It's that bad. I might actually pick apart some articles, to be honest. I think that might be good fun. Every time I read the BBC News, I am annoyed within about 1 second. But anyway, I'm absolutely certain that the Banksy bubble is going to burst. I think the investors and the other people with their fingers in the pie at the moment, they need to basically get rid of their Banksys, because the bubble is going to burst, and in a few years, maybe less than a generation, it's going to be worthless and it's going to be impossible to sell on. Anyway, that is it for today, folks. I do hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day or their evening. Do let me know what you think in the comments, of course. Subscribe to the channel if you want a bit more like this. I'm going to have some video on Sean Atwood coming out soon, I think. Another video on Sean Atwood. If you're interested in that kind of content, you can check out my past videos. You can also check out my two favourite channels on YouTube. You've got Poet Laundrette, and he's covering the Sean Atwood situation, and you've also got What is Truth, the podcast, which is a great listen as well. What is Truth had Andrew Gine on the other day as a guest, and it was a very good show. It took in about 10,000 viewers at one point. So anyway, all excellent. But anyway, folks, you can subscribe to those channels down in the links below, and I will catch you in the next one. Cheers.